Hello, everyone. My name is AJ, and today I will be taking an in depth look at Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. It was developed by studio CD Projekt Red, a Polish company that is slowly becoming the most beloved game developing company in the world. This is a company that publicly denounced DRM, bad DLC, that is surprisingly tolerant of piracy, company that does not pursue bad business practices, and most importantly, treats gamers with respect. Because of that, gamers have responded with equal kindness and turned Witcher into one of the most successful RPG franchises in the world. First and second installments sold over 6 million copies combined, which is quite a feat, and God knows how many more were pirated. For me personally, Wild Hunt was the first Witcher game that I really got into. First one was an almost instant turnoff. I hated the combat system, never returning back to it. Second game had its claws in me a bit longer. Combat system was a bit more polished, reactive, and fluid, among many other improvements, of course. Witcher 3 took all that even further. I certainly don't have to tell anyone how beautiful the game is. I don't have a powerful machine, so I had to play on minimal settings, but even then the game looked great. But as we all know, the real star of Witcher series is writing. I don't know how good it was in previous games, but in Wild Hunt, writing is spectacular. Character interactions range from believably dramatic to incredibly hilarious. Dialogue itself is just superb. Not only is it delivered very cleanly using great voice actors, but it is written so well and smart that you believe every line. It is especially noticeable during bigger quests. Characters talk and react naturally. They say things that make sense, rarely diverging toward cliches and tropes. What deserve the most praise when it comes to writing, however, are certain types of quests. The longer ones, overarching and intertwined with other quests and events, like the whole arc with Bloody Baron. Now that is a well written quest, and not just narratively. It was also mechanically right. Let me elaborate. When it comes to creating a quest, the biggest hurdle is motivation. Players must have a reason to do it. Usually it's experience or some minor physical reward. That reason becomes obvious if you're doing a main story quest, like the arc involving Bloody Baron in Witcher 3. You help him, and in return, he provides you with a certain kind of information. Everything is crystal clear. But needing to do a quest and wanting to do a quest are two very different things. See, there are no tangible rewards promised to you, at least not significant ones, which means the player has to be motivated some other way. So, how does Wild Hunt deal with it? It makes it interesting by creating intrigue. See, quests in Witcher 3 still have very clear goals. In Bloody Baron's case, for instance, it was all about finding his family. Except in practice, it was not that straightforward, because Witcher 3 does something ingenious with its writing. Characters withhold information in a very meaningful way. You never know everything. You never know enough, actually. And I'm not talking about writers withholding information. That is very different. I'm talking about characters withholding information on purpose. That creates layers in a quest. The first layer is all the information given to you freely. Of course, you can't be sure what is true and what isn't, so you talk to other characters that are not always willing to help you, or you investigate various locations using your Witcher senses. What was smart about that is that Geralt can actually make wrong conclusions about things. After all, he doesn't know everything he needs to. So you follow clues, interrogate people until you finally have enough. You complete the picture. You find all the pieces, not the game. And that is exceptionally satisfying. I mean, when you realize who Baron's wife is, it's rather cool. Don't get me wrong, most of the quests are still rather generic, getting something, killing something, and the like, but there are quite a few jewels in this game. Baron alone has plenty to offer. The conclusion of his story is incredibly well handled. Writers avoided so many pitfalls that could have turned it into something mediocre, but instead we got a really deep and meaningful storyline. It's a minor spoiler, but there was a short arc with a miscarriage that was done fantastically well. I don't remember the last time game made me feel so many emotions. Several main story quests share this intricacy of storytelling. There are some fun moments involving Triss, Dandelion, and a rather emotional side quest involving Kira Metz and a haunted tower. If upcoming Witcher games will stick to this type of storytelling, I will most certainly play them all. But let's get to mechanics, where I found a lot more problems. Remember when I said that I quit playing the first Witcher because it had terrible combat mechanics? Well, in all honesty, I am not too keen on Wild Hunt's combat either. It's extremely simplistic with very little strategy to offer. Offensively, it's a single button combat if you think about it, where you occasionally hold shift for a heavy attack and Q to use one of your signs. 90% of your battles are done with a sword, and every single battle is identical. Press mouse 1 until enemy dies, rinse and repeat. Defensively, it's even worse. Blocking is what you do when fighting humanoids with an option to parry if you time your block right. I really appreciate it actually because there is no indicator lighting up above the enemy telling you when to block. You have to time it yourself based on character animations. That was a refreshing level of independence after playing games like Shadow of Mordor and Assassin's Creed. When it comes to monsters, you can still block, but dodging is usually more effective. It's either a short step to either side or a roll. That removes any fluidity from combat. See, you rarely fight a single enemy, so when you fight several at once, you need to be on the move, which means doing a lot of jumping around with occasional swing or two at the enemy. There was no real strategy here at all. All you do as a Witcher is roll around a lot, and you really need to do that. Monsters hit hard, bosses hit even harder, especially on higher difficulty levels. And here's the thing, when it comes to combat, Wild Hunt shot itself in the foot with how they made Ciri. So, during story flashbacks, you get to play as Ciri. Her combat is identical, except for her dodges. She does not roll or jump. Instead, she has these super fast dashes, short and long range, that are more akin to teleporting. Now, these were incredible when talking about positional strategy in combat. These dashes are so fast that you can actually flank an enemy or even appear behind him. I loved fighting as Ciri. Swordplay was still heavy and simplistic, but her dodge mechanic made fights much, much more dynamic and positional. There's an incredible degree of satisfaction watching your opponent swing his sword, yet before he lands a hit, you dash behind him and finish him off. And that applies to big fights too, with multiple enemies. Dashing around the battlefield fighting 3, 4, or 5 enemies at once and not getting hit once gives you an incredible rush. But eventually you have to get back to Geralt and his awkward rolls. I did appreciate the heaviness of combat, however. Sword swings are not instant, especially heavy strikes, which creates that illusion of heaviness in your swords. It takes time to raise, then swing it, and so on. We're talking about half a second delay here for every swing, but that is enough to create that feeling of heaviness. Your last tool is your signs, and that is where combat breaks completely. This game should have been named How Igni Conquered the World. That sign is broken, period, especially on higher levels. If you invest plenty of points into signs, you will win every single battle with ease. See, Igni has a chance to set someone on fire, and if it does, it deals a ton of damage, especially to bosses and mythical creatures. If you level Igni enough, especially the very last skill in its branch, burn chance becomes 100%. You see where I'm going with that. At that point, your stamina regenerates so fast that you can cast Igni every few seconds. All humanoids are affected by burn, and the majority of monsters, with a few exceptions. I have killed even high level monsters with burn alone without ever pulling out my swords. That was very poorly designed. Apart from that, signs are actually quite fun to use and provide that little bit of strategy that the game needs. They all have their uses, albeit sometimes too specific. One of the signs is a trap, for instance, that slows enemies who are in it down. The only time I really used it was when dealing with golem type monsters. and that was maybe 5 times tops. Mind control was even less useful. Handy with big groups of bandits, just not as handy as Igni or even Ard. Ard is a knockback sign that has a chance to knock enemies down to the ground. If they're down, they can be one shot by a single stab to the heart. So that sign can be considered quite overpowered as well. And finally, we have a shield sign that I barely used, although I could write that off as a preference. It does have plenty of uses. The most interesting element of combat was preparations. Brewing a potion that will be suitable for the situation, making bombs that will inhibit the enemy in some way, and creating oils that increase your damage against certain types of enemies. That was a very satisfying mechanic when fighting contract monsters and bosses. An intellectual approach to combat instead of just a brute one. However, preparation mechanic had an inhibitor of its own: inventory system. It is just terrible, especially with all the craftables and resources. You have to actually find the oil or the potion or the bomb in that mess of an inventory among books, food, and other random crap. Thankfully, items of same type are kept together like oils and bombs, but still, when you have 20 of them and the only way they differ is color, you have to manually hover over each one until you find what you need. That is so frustrating. Resource tab is even worse. You collect so many different herbs, materials, and monster loot that it becomes a challenge to find anything in your inventory. It's just a clutter of stuff. Thankfully, you don't need to use materials manually. Crafting system sees what you have and uses it when you press craft. But if you want to sell some of that stuff, and you will need to sell some of it eventually, it will take you forever to go through. Crafting menu is even worse. When I first started finding recipes for armor, weapons, and consumables, I was excited. There was a lot of different stuff to choose from, and I could not wait to start crafting. But the further into the game I got, the more discouraged I was. You collect a metric ton of recipes for each of your inventory slots: chest piece, trousers, steel sword, silver sword, and so on. And they all appear in a very, very, very long list in your crafting menu. But the only thing that is displayed in that list is the name of the item. And that is the biggest problem. Because items have different stats, different levels, different purpose. And let's say you leveled a few times and want to see if you can craft anything for your level, you will need to manually check every single recipe. Every single one. That is infuriating. So I just stuck to Witcher gear and never bothered crafting anything else. The biggest offender, however, was the weight system. Tell me, when was the last time weight system added value to the game? That's right, never. Because it doesn't. It's not some challenge for you to overcome or some puzzle to solve. It's just a massive inconvenience, especially for those of us who like exploration. Inventory fills up rather rapidly when you start finding pieces of equipment like swords and armors, especially medium or heavy ones. That problem is especially apparent in Skellige Islands, where you can find a ton of treasures and smuggler caches. So you empty your inventory, swim halfway around the world to find a few chests, loot but a few of them, and bam, your weight capacity is full. So now you have to go all the way back to the nearest merchant to sell just some of that stuff, because you know that he won't have enough money for all your goodies. So now you're on a different quest around the world to get rid of all your stuff just to go back and get some more. Because you want money, right? You need it. So you have to do it. I mean, who said that limited vendor money is a good idea? It's just another annoyance and an inconvenience that adds absolutely nothing to the game. Consumable crafting has a few interesting caveats. First one is the way you restock them. See, basic logic dictates that you craft a potion, you use it up, and then craft another. I mean, that's what games taught us after all. That's how pretty much every other game does that. But not here. In Wild Hunt, you craft everything but once: potions, oils, decoctions, and even bombs. So, what do you do when you run out? Well, you meditate? No, that's not a joke. You meditate for an hour, lose a single unit of alcohol from your inventory, and absolutely everything is restocked. Every bomb, every potion, everything. I still don't know whether it's just stupid or meant to simplify things. See, certain things require 4 or 5 ingredients, rare ones too, yet all you need to restock is a bottle of booze. That was just strange. Second caveat is the ease of use. See, you only get 4 slots to put your consumables in, 2 for potions and 2 for bombs, and there is no quick way to use them. You have to access a wheel menu by pressing tab, and in that menu, select what you want. You use it, go to menu again, and pick something else. That's how clunky it is. At least potions have hotkeys, yet still only 2. See, potions are really useful in this game, even crucial, I would say. Yet using them is extremely difficult. You can only have 2 equipped at once. If you want to change them, you have to go into inventory, find them in that mess, equip them, and then use them. Rinse and repeat. That is tragically bad. I mean, your signs have hotkeys 3 to 7. Why not do the same for potions just through shift plus the numbers? Control plus the numbers for bombs. This is not some future tech I'm talking about. Secondary key values have been in use for quite some time now. But that would not translate too well to consoles, would it now? So we got our equipment, we got our potions and oils, which means it's time to fight something bigger. That was the most exciting part, especially after how monster hunting was introduced to us using Noonwraith and Griffin in the very first area. Once again, preparation was involved, only slightly different kind of preparation. You had to find information, talk to witnesses, investigate attacks, find reasons for said monsters being there. In the case of Noonwraith, there was a whole backstory involved. Who it was, why she died, why she stayed, and so on. With Griffin, there was a lot of tracking, investigation, and even an autopsy of sorts. That culminated in creating bait and luring it into a fight. It was not just a see monster, kill monster approach. It was smart, intelligent. That's why I was extremely disappointed to find out that most other monster fights are so simplified. Don't get me wrong, there are some good monster fights still, like the Wraith in the Tower or a werewolf in the Magic Garden. These have significant backstories, meaning, reason for existence, while most others, unfortunately, feel copy pasted. It's the same sequence of events every single time. Talk to main quest giver, talk to some witnesses, investigate for clues where you will inevitably find some blood and a trail of either footsteps or scent, and then the actual fight itself. After just a few of those, these hunting quests became mere chores. And that was a terrible realization. After all, those very first Noonwraith and Griffin kills are so involving. So when most other fights are but kill quests, you can't help but feel disappointed. If nothing, all that fighting yields you experience. And experience, as we all know, leads to levels, skills, and all that jazz. And I gotta say, Wild Hunt has the worst skill tree I have seen in a while. For starters, it is extremely boring. You cannot deny that. At the very beginning and much further into the trees, all you get are passive increases in stats. More damage with attack, more intensity in a sign, and things like that. Some of them are pretty good, sure, like aforementioned 100% burn chance. Well, though that's a bad example. See, 100% burn chance breaks combat entirely. When every enemy in the vicinity can be set on fire repeatedly, it alters the pace of the battle completely. However, most other passives work the other way around. They barely alter that pace. Again, they are useful, I don't deny that, but they are very boring. I mean, leveling should be exciting, right? You should plan ahead, but that is not the case here. Another huge issue is that the skill system is inherently broken. There are 3 main branches you can level: physical attack related, sign related, and potion and consumable related. The problem lies in the fact that you absolutely must specialize in one branch to be effective in combat. You don't get many skill points, and spending them a bit in every branch won't do much for your character, if anything. And while going full attack or full signs are valid strategies, going full potion branch is not. Not only don't potions add anything to your combat potential, Not having any points in attack or signs removes a whole lot of combat potential. You will be a lot weaker, do a lot less damage, and slow down your progress altogether. So an entire branch becomes rather irrelevant. But that's not the biggest problem. Biggest problem is that leveling a skill up is not enough. You still have to activate it. There are only 12 slots available for that, 4 sets of 3. So even if you put points into a skill, it won't take effect until you drag it into one of 12 slots. That increases the need for specialization even further, as only 12 skills can be active at the same time. The third reason for specialization is mutagens. There are 3 types: red ones that boost your attack, blue ones that boost your sign intensity, and green ones that boost vitality. Remember I said there are 4 sets of 3 slots? Well, each set of 3 is connected to a mutagen slot that gives bonuses based on its color. All sword skills, for example, are red, so if you activate 3 red skills and add a red mutagen to them, you will receive a big bonus to attack power. Same applies to other skills. Signs are blue, and connecting 3 blue skills with a blue mutagen adds a lot of sign intensity and so on. That is a bad leveling system. Don't get me wrong, specialization is often good, but in this case it's extreme. I mean, every branch has 20 skills, plus a secondary branch with 10. So there are 70 skills in total, yet you only get to use 12 for some reason. The main question is why? Why is that a good thing? How did that make any sense? After all, you use everything: swords, signs, and potions. I would say you have to use everything in order to play effectively. Yet we are not allowed to play freely. We're confined when it comes to personalized play, confined to using a tiny amount of skills when every single branch has something useful to offer. For example, I want the sign path. I like using them, I really do. But I also like potions. Like I said, there are a lot of good and useful potions, yet I cannot use them effectively because I cannot get the passives I need to use them effectively, like increasing toxicity threshold or duration time. It was a terrible approach to leveling, just terrible in my opinion. Let's get back to something positive: the world. This is one well designed world. It is extremely thematic and, more importantly, consistent with that theme without getting samey. There are no drastic biome jumps like going from desert to grassland to tundra and things like that. It's one big, disgusting swamp with a bit of grassland. Yet different parts of the same map feel distinct enough. For instance, the swamp itself is mostly empty, lots of gloom there, monsters and poison. Midridge of the map is a bit more populated. You can find quite a few small settlements in need of some assistance, while the northern regions grow denser by the steppe, culminating into a beautiful city. Can I just say how glad I am to finally see a proper city in a game? I'm so tired when games lie to me and say that these 10 houses you see around you are a capital. Novigrad feels like a capital. It is a proper city that has its harbor, living quarters, markets, and villas on the mountaintop. Not without a palace, of course. Second major map, Skelliger Islands, was a bit more disappointing. The theme is still there and it looks fantastic, but getting around is just so damn inconvenient, especially if you are visiting all the points of interest the game has to offer. Visiting notice boards in major population centers reveals all the points of interest in the surrounding area. Those vary from hidden treasures to abandoned settlements, smuggler caches, and so on. Getting around Main Island was bad enough. That's why I hate mountains in video games. Hated them in Skyrim, hated them in Far Cry 4, hated them here. But at least they can serve as a minor obstacle and a sort of guideline along which to traverse the land. Water, on the other hand, is just an inconvenience. There are so many points of interest in water that getting to them is just painful. It is slow, regardless if you're using a boat or not. It is not satisfying. There is nothing of interest to see on your way there, unlike travels on land. I mean, I hated traveling in Skellige. It's a great place thematically, no arguing there, but from gameplay perspective, I just hated it. What I hated even more, however, was the distribution of these random events, random encounters, and whatnot. When you first appear in Velen, you are level 3. max. You go to a nearby town, look at the notice board, and unlock all the points of interest around you. You start visiting those points of interest and quickly realize just how varied in level they all are. For example, there can be a monster nest nearby with level 6 Knickers. Then 50 steps further, a bandit camp with level 16 bandits. You go further and find a treasure guarded by level 5 monsters. Another 50 steps further and a cave with level 22 monsters inside. I mean, very close to the spot where you first appear in Velen is a cave with level 32 monster inside. That's how ridiculous the distribution is. That is a bad way to populate an area with events. Monster levels should not vary this drastically in a single area, otherwise exploration becomes unrewarding. I can't remember how many times I was tracking a question mark on the map just to find a high level monster there. Some of these places are far away and it is endlessly frustrating to find a monster 10 levels higher than you after a 10-minute walk. I understand there being two or three places with high level monsters that were guarding really good stuff, but no, you find creatures stronger than you all the time. That entire map should have been divided into smaller sections, each with a minimum and maximum level monsters in it. This way you know where you can go explore and where you will get instantly killed. Not only does it save time, but it creates an invisible guide of sorts. And speaking of maps, why the hell haven't developers made maps where you can leave permanent markers on, where you can write things down and stuff like that? Is it really that hard code wise? Especially in open world games? Especially in Witcher? You constantly find things that are not on the map, like monsters, for example. Yet you can't leave a marker saying monsters, this level, this type, etc., etc., so you can come back later when your level is high enough. So frustrating. Speaking of side activities, the biggest one is a card game called Gwent. I don't think there's much to say about it. It is extremely simplistic, so people will either hate it or love it. I did enjoy some of it. The tournament was fun because it was tough, but in general, it's just a harmless distraction. So, what's the conclusion? I like this game a lot, despite all its shortcomings. Story and exploration alone carried it for me. Combat was serviceable and good enough for what it was trying to achieve. I just want a bit more complexity in these hand to hand or sword to sword fights. Inventory and crafting menus were a mess. Those really need to be fixed. Maybe a bit higher variety of these random events. All in all, it was a really enjoyable game. Not perfect, naturally, and not terrible either. It has a lot of place to grow, but definitely worth a look. So, my name is AJ. This was an in depth look at Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, leave a comment, like, and share, and I will see you all soon.